In my previous video, I showed how I georeferenced a map of the area of Abu Rawash. When I was georeferencing that map, it became very clear that the pyramid area was not at the same scale as the rest of the area. So if we turn that map on now, I'll just make it transparent so you can see. You can see that we were able to line up the cemeteries very clearly, the village, this northwest cemetery over here, but the pyramid is clearly completely the wrong scale and indeed the wrong angle compared to the real pyramid on the ground, which is here. So we now need to georeference the pyramid in order to have an accurate plan of that as well. First of all, we need to zoom in on the pyramid area. So we're going to be looking at approximately that much. Let's allow it to regenerate. There we go, rather attractive. So you've got the pyramid, enclosure wall. This, I think, is a spoil heap. And this is the mortuary temple here. And, of course, a boat pit there. So we go up to here. We make sure that the right map is in the box and we fit to display. Then we have to turn it on. Okay, and what we've got is an opaque map, which we now need to make transparent. There it is. Now, this is an interesting feature. So I'm having difficulty making up my mind whether this is this causeway, and it's the causeway of the Pyramid Temple, or whether it is this is in fact some kind of elongated spoil heap, possibly from the early part of the 20th century, a Decauville run or something like that, and the pyramid's causeway went off at a different angle. Now, it's actually possible that either is true, because we've already established that the rest of the map this was cut from was in fact at a different scale and slightly different angle to the temple and the pyramid themselves. So it's entirely possible that that distortion has affected the angle of the causeway in this image, and that it is what should actually be this one. So we're not going to worry too much about the causeway. Instead, we're going to try and get the temple accurate. So if we align the temple, we find that, zoom in a little bit, we find that it aligns reasonably well, but it's a little bit small. So we're going to need to increase our, oops, one too many zeros. Okay. Now this is a little bit big, as you can see. A little bit big. The mortuary temple's a bit big. Oh, the pyramid, the subsidiary pyramid is about right. So we're going to need to reduce that slightly. Probably 2250 is about right. Let's just move this up here a little bit so it's oh, that's looking a lot better. Okay, I think that's probably close enough. We don't have to go absolutely bonkers at this point. So we are going to see if we can align this pyramid to the outline of the remains. Just going to see how big that is. That's the T-shaped trench in the middle. Okay, so let's just turn it off and have another look. These look like subsidiary shafts or something. Okay, so this is a really nice angle here. So I think we can begin with this corner of the mortuary temple in our pinning the map. We could ad nauseum change the scale, but it isn't going to add very much. We're probably about the limit of where we can go with this scale changing now. I'm just going to turn off the map and pop it there. Okay. So now we have a lovely pin in the map here, but now we need to add some pins down here, and you can see the boat pit here is really in the wrong place. So let's try and shift the boat pit into the right location by sticking a point there. Now, something that's really important to remember is, because this is a plan that's being overlaid on an image, the plan lines themselves actually have, when they're in the GIS at the very least, an area to them. So one of these lines here could easily cover 30 or 40 centimeters on the ground in this image. So it's important to remember that the lines also need to be included when you're thinking about areas and points to pin. So I'm actually putting this point at the very back end of the lines of the boat pit. And I'm going to put it at the very back end of the boat pit there. Okay. There we are. Now, interestingly, that's gone slightly wonky, which is quite strange. But never mind, we can pull that back. So now we have to decide how much of the pyramid that we can see is actually covered by the shape of the pyramid in the image. The question is that the edge of the pyramid in the image, or is it that? Because that's a very different prospect. Now, assuming that's the satellite pyramid, which it certainly looks like, I would have thought it would be more like that point there. Okay, but I don't actually like what that's done to it. That's made it quite squashed. And even if we pull this one down here like this, yeah, that's not good. That doesn't work very well with 2. So that suggests to me that those points are wrong, and that in fact we should take the outline of the surviving shape of the pyramid to be what is being drawn here. It's worth remembering that these are very early plans, and that quite often early plans are not going to be quite as precise as a modern one, quite often because the temple or the pyramid hadn't been fully excavated then, so they're sort of guessing a little bit in the corners. So what I'm going to do is, we know that 4 and 3 are not good, so we'll just delete those, and you see that immediately pops back and it all looks a bit better now. So I'm going to delete those. There we go, get rid of the table. It can be worth popping in a point to test whether a location is a good point for a ground control point or not. And you can always delete them if it turns out to be wrong. Now, I think we also need to just tidy up the back side of this pyramid. So it's got a little bit messy. And I think that's probably there, isn't it? That might not actually be very good. We will pop this in too. And get the pyramid lined up properly. There we go, that's the edge of the... That's it. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Now what's really interesting about this is that you can see this line here is apparently the enclosure wall around the pyramid. So it's the pyramid enclosure rather than the complex enclosure. Now what's quite interesting here is that it would appear that the enclosure around the pyramid has not been drawn very well. Let's pop that up to there. Okay, now that's better. Okay, so I have tried to pop 6 and 7 into the correct location, and I've actually ended up with something that's a little bit stretched, and it's knocked the central pyramid structures in the mortuary temple out of alignment a little bit more. So I'm just going to try and see if I can fix that. Like I said, it's always worth putting in extra and then deleting them later if you need to. Now, that's not too bad, but I suspect we're going to find there's some wrong positions. Now, one of the things that's interesting is this enclosure wall has now been pulled away from the actual enclosure wall. So we now have to make a choice about which points we're going to go with. If we take a look at the residuals, we can see that there are several with very high residuals. And this indicates the overall error or the difference between where the point is and where the computer believes the point should be based on the points it already has. It makes a prediction and then calculates the difference. Now, this residual here, 9, is for 1. Now, we can remove that, but then you see we're really quite far away from the corner of the mortuary temple, which is unfortunate. And furthermore, the wall around the pyramid enclosure wall, no longer lines up as neatly as it did before. So I'm going to leave 1 on. Another one with really high residuals is 2. This is the one that attaches the boat pit to the end of the boat pit. If I turn that one off, again, it drops further south as an image, and that I think is inaccurate, and therefore I'm going to reattach that there. Another one with a high residual of 6 is number 6. Now, number 6 is quite high. Let's turn number 6 off. Number 7 is also quite high. If we turn off 6, we ought to turn off 7. And then 9 is also very bad. That's on 5, and 9 and 4. 4 and 9 are both quite bad. 4, let's turn 4 off, and 9. Okay. So if I turn off 5, right. Now, although that gives me a very good residual of just over a metre, it also doesn't actually line up very well with the pyramid I have in front of me. So you can see that the back is very far off. They don't line up. Here in this corner, this is clearly that satellite pyramid doesn't line up. Now, in the case of the satellite pyramid, this is in a dashed line. So it may be that the location of the pyramid and the outline of the wall wasn't at all known when the map was drawn, and therefore we should take this whole corner with a bit of a pinch of salt. But nevertheless, the pyramid is drawn clearly, and I think we should accept that that is probably accurate. So I'm going to pin that back down to there. Okay, and that gives me a residual of 3.59, which is better. 5 or 11. 11 is clearly better, so let's delete 5. Now, how about this side is actually looking pretty good, so we could go with that. We don't need to add any more points if we don't want to. If they don't add anything, that's fine. Now, this might be another inaccuracy in the drawing, and just that they've drawn a box around it. And I'm inclined to think that that's probably the case. In the same way that the causeway is clearly either there is a completely missing void, absent causeway, or it's going down here. So I'm going to rectify that at that level, and I'm going to accept that some of this drawing is off. This is because I can see the areas that are incorrect. I understand why I have chosen not to correct them. And if I wanted to, I could come back and correct them anyway. But I would like the bits of the image that are very clearly drawn and that are very easily relatable to the satellite image to be correct, and I will worry about things like the enclosure wall that may have been affected by the inaccuracies in the rest of the map that we talked about earlier. So I'm going to rectify this at 3.59. Map 1. Abu Rawash Pyramid. Page 367B. Because 367A was the overview. I'm going to save that. And then we add it. There we go. Now we can remove this one. So the ungeoreferenced version is still in the file if we wanted to do a different georeferencing again in the future. Save it. And we're all done.